Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of history's most haunting workplaces. A place where young women sewed dreams of the American promise into white cotton blouses. Where immigrant girls worked 14-hour days believing that suffering today would buy freedom tomorrow. Where 146 people discovered that locked doors don't care about your dreams. Before we start, dim the lights if you can. Maybe pull a blanket close. Because where we're going, fire doesn't just burn, it swallows hope whole. Flames don't just spread, they hunt. And doors don't just lock, they become tombstones. Drop your city and the time you're watching this in the comments. I love knowing who else is awake during these quiet hours, listening to stories of people who walked into work one Saturday and never walked out. Now, close your eyes for just a moment. Feel the safety of where you are, the comfort of knowing every exit in your home. Remember that feeling, because you're about to lose it. You wake up on Saturday, March 25th, 1911. It's 4:40 in the afternoon, and you're tired. Your fingers ache from pushing fabric through the sewing machine for 9 hours straight. The needle has stabbed through cotton so many times today that the rhythm is burned into your brain. Click, clack, click, clack. A mechanical heartbeat that won't stop even when you close your eyes at night. You're 19 years old. You left Italy 6 months ago with your mother and sister, speaking maybe 20 words of English, most of them useless. Please. Thank you. How much? You work on the 9th floor of the Asch building in Greenwich Village, sewing shirtwaists, those puffed sleeve blouses that fashionable American women wear. You make about $8 a week. That's if you don't get docked for mistakes, or for the thread you use, or for taking too long in the bathroom. The factory floor stretches out like a maze of wooden tables and sewing machines, about 260 women crammed into a space roughly the size of a basketball court. The air smells like machine oil and sweat, and the lunch someone brought from home, probably cabbage. Fabric scraps litter the floor. They pile up against the walls, sometimes waist high. Nobody ever sweeps them. Why bother? Tomorrow there will be more. Above your head, paper patterns hang from wires stretched across the ceiling. Finished shirtwaists dangle on lines like ghosts. Wicker baskets overflow with blouses waiting to be moved. The room is a tinderbox. Every surface is flammable. But you don't think about that. You think about the fact that in 20 minutes you get to go home. 20 minutes. You don't have 20 minutes. At 4:40 p.m, someone on the 8th floor, one floor below you, tosses a cigarette into a scrap bin under a cutter's table. Smoking is against the rules, but everyone does it. The foremen do it. The cutters do it. What's one more rule that doesn't matter? The cigarette lands in 2 months' worth of fabric cuttings. Hundreds of pounds of cotton scraps dry as kindling. The fire starts so small. A wisp of smoke. A little orange glow in the bin. Then it touches the paper patterns hanging overhead. Then it's not small anymore. By 4:43 p.m, 3 minutes after ignition, the entire 8th floor is burning. You won't know this yet. You're on the 9th floor, bent over your sewing machine, finishing the last sleeve of the day. You're thinking about dinner. You're thinking about your sister, who works beside you. You're thinking about anything except fire. But fire is thinking about you. Someone on the 8th floor tries to use the fire hose mounted on the wall. The valve is rusted shut. The hose is rotten. Water dribbles out, then stops. It's useless. It's been useless for years, but nobody bothered to replace it because replacing things costs money. And the owners of the Triangle Waste Company, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, don't like spending money on anything that doesn't turn a profit. A bookkeeper on the 8th floor has the presence of mind to telephone the 10th floor, where the owners and their families happen to be visiting that afternoon. Fire, she says. Get out. The 10th floor gets the message, but there's no way to call the 9th floor. No alarm system, no intercom, no warning. You'll find out about the fire the same way everyone else on the 9th floor does, when the flames start coming up through the floorboards. 18 minutes. That's how long the fire burns before it's under control. 18 minutes from ignition to containment. In 18 minutes, 146 people will die. Most of them will die on your floor. Some will burn. Some will choke on smoke. Some will be trampled in the chaos. And some, 62 people, will make a choice that isn't really a choice at all. Jump from the 9th floor windows and fall 100 feet to the pavement below. No one who jumps will survive. You probably won't survive either. Let me tell you why. The Asch building stands 10 stories tall on the corner of Greene Street and Washington Place, just east of Washington Square Park. It was built in 1901 by a man named Joseph J. Asch, who wanted to construct a modern, fireproof building, and technically he succeeded. The Asch building has a steel frame. The exterior walls are clad in terracotta, a non-combustible material. The floors are supported by iron beams. If you struck a match and held it to the wall wouldn't burn. The problem is, fireproof only describes the skeleton of the building. It doesn't describe what's inside. The floors are wood, the window frames are wood, the doors are wood, the tables are wood, the wicker baskets are wicker, which burns beautifully. The fabric is cotton, which burns even better. Machine oil is seeped into the floorboards for 10 years. In some places, the wood is so soaked with oil that it's practically flammable paste. The Asch building won't collapse in a fire, that's true, but everything inside it will burn just fine. You work for the Triangle Waste Company, which occupies the top 3 floors, 8, 9, and 10. The company makes women's shirtwaists, lightweight blouses with puffed sleeves and high collars. In 1911, every fashionable woman in America owns at least 3. Business is good. The owners, Max Blank and Isaac Harris, are known as the Shirtwaist Kings. They have multiple factories. They're rich. You're not rich. You make about $8 a week, assuming you don't get fined. You work 52 hours a week, 9 hours a day, Monday through Friday, 7 hours on Saturday. During the busy season, you work until 9 at night. No overtime pay. If you complain, you get sent home. If you complain too much, you get fired. There are always more girls waiting to take your job. You're 19. Most of the workers here are young women between the ages of 16 and 23, though some are as young as 14. The law says children under 16 shouldn't work in factories, but the law is a suggestion, and suggestions are easy to ignore when you need the money. Your family needs the money. So you sit at your sewing machine for 9 hours a day, 6 days a week, in a room that's crammed with 260 other workers, and you sew sleeves onto shirtwaists. You're paid by the piece, not by the hour. The faster you sew, the more you make. Mistakes cost you. Talking costs you. Bathroom breaks that last too long cost you. Silence becomes a survival skill. The 9th floor is roughly 9,000 square feet, about the size of 4 average American homes placed side by side. Into this space, the owners have crammed 260 workers, 240 sewing machines, dozens of long cutting tables, wicker baskets full of fabric, hanging racks of finished shirtwaists, and enough cotton scraps to stuff a mattress factory. The sewing machines are placed so close together that you can barely squeeze between the rows. If you need to get to the bathroom, which is on the other side of the room, you have to navigate a maze of tables, baskets, machines, and other workers. It takes time you don't get paid for. There are 2 staircases, one on the Greene Street side of the building, one on the Washington Place side. Each staircase is 3 feet wide, 3 feet, just wide enough for one person at a time, if that person doesn't mind their shoulders brushing the walls. There's also a fire escape. One fire escape bolted to the exterior of the building on the Greene Street side. It's made of iron, narrow as a ladder, nearly vertical. It doesn't reach the ground. It stops at the 2nd floor where it ends above a skylight. In the event of an emergency, you're supposed to climb out a window, step onto this iron ladder, and descend 9 stories at a steep angle in a long dress and button-up boots, hoping the whole structure doesn't collapse under your weight. Nobody has ever practiced this. There's also a freight elevator and a passenger elevator, both of which can hold about 12 people if everyone squeezes in tight. That's it. That's the escape plan. 2 staircases, 1 fire escape, 2 elevators, for 500 people. And one of those staircases, Washington Place, has a door that locks from the outside. The door at the bottom of the Washington Place staircase is locked every day. Not sometimes, every day. Why? To prevent theft. The owners don't trust you. They assume that if the door is left unlocked, Workers will sneak out early, or steal fabric, or let union organisers into the building so they lock it. Every morning the door gets locked. Every evening a foreman with a key unlocks it and checks each worker's handbag as they leave. One door, one key, one foreman. What happens if the foreman isn't there? What happens if the foreman already escaped through another exit and took the key with him? What happens if there's a fire? You're about to find out. New York State Labor Law Section 80, passed in 1909, explicitly prohibits locking doors during working hours. The law was written specifically to prevent situations like this. But laws are only useful if someone enforces them, and in 1911 factory inspections are rare. Inspectors are overworked and underpaid. Owners bribe them. Violations are ignored. Max Blank and Isaac Harris know the door is supposed to stay unlocked. They lock it anyway. They've been doing it for years. In 1909, workers at the Triangle Waste Company went on strike, demanding better conditions, shorter hours, and unlocked doors. The strike was part of a larger movement called the Uprising of 20,000, in which garment workers across New York City walked off the job. It was one of the largest strikes by women in American history. The owners refused every demand. The strike ended after several months. Most factories agreed to minor improvements. Triangle did not. Workers came back to the same long hours, the same low pay, the same locked doors. You remember the strike. You weren't working here yet, you were still in Italy, but your sister was here. She walked the picket line in the freezing cold. She got nothing for it except frozen feet and a reputation as a troublemaker. Now she works beside you, sewing sleeves in silence. At 4:40 p.m. on March 25th, 1911, the Washington Place door is locked. It will still be locked when you try to open it. Let's talk about what's in this room. Cotton fabric. Thousands of yards of it. Lightweight, highly flammable cotton in white, cream and pastel colours. It hangs from racks above your head. It sits in wicker baskets beside the sewing machines. It drapes over tables. Some of it is already sewn into shirtwaists. Some of it is still in bolts, waiting to be cut. Cotton burns fast. It doesn't smoulder. It doesn't give you time to think. It ignites and spreads like it's been soaked in kerosene. Then there are the scraps. Every time a cutter slices fabric for a shirtwaist, there are leftover pieces, odd shapes, narrow strips, tiny triangles of cloth that can't be used. These scraps get swept into bins under the cutting tables. The bins are made of wood. The scraps haven't been emptied in 2 months. By March 25th, some of the bins contain hundreds of pounds of cotton cuttings. Dry, loosely packed, surrounded by air. Perfect kindling. Above the cutting tables, paper patterns hang from wires. These are templates used to cut fabric into the correct shapes. They're made of tissue-thin paper. If a single spark reaches them, they'll go up like matchsticks. The floor itself is wood, soaked with machine oil from 10 years of sewing machines dripping lubricant. In some spots, the oil is seeped so deeply into the grain that the wood is practically saturated. The wicker baskets are bone dry. Wicker burns hot and fast. The wooden tables have been in use for a decade. They're coated in fabric dust, oil residue, and the occasional spilled lunch. There are no fire extinguishers. There is no sprinkler system. In 1909, an engineer inspected the building and sent a letter to the owners recommending the installation of a sprinkler system. He explained that the combination of flammable materials, inadequate exits, and high worker density made the building a serious fire hazard. Max Blank and Isaac Harris ignored the letter. Sprinklers cost money. At 4:40 p.m, someone on the 8th floor, 1 floor below you, finishes cutting fabric and tosses a cigarette butt into a scrap bin. Maybe it's not fully extinguished. Maybe a tiny ember is still glowing. It doesn't matter. The bin catches fire. For a few seconds, it's just a small flame, barely noticeable in the dim light of the factory floor. Then it touches the paper patterns overhead. Then it's not small anymore. Flame races across the paper patterns like a fuse. It drops onto the fabric hanging from the racks. It spreads to the wicker baskets. It licks at the oil-soaked floorboards. By the time anyone realizes what's happening, the 8th floor is already burning, And you, one floor above, have no idea. 3 minutes. That's how long it takes for the 8th floor to become uninhabitable. From the moment the cigarette hits the scrap bin to the moment flames are licking the ceiling, 180 seconds. A bookkeeper on the 8th floor, Mary Leventhal, sees the smoke first. She's sitting at her desk near the windows when she notices a strange glow under one of the cutting tables. For a moment she thinks someone dropped a lamp. Then she smells it, that acrid chemical smell of cotton burning. She stands up, opens her mouth to shout a warning, but before sound leaves her throat, the flames reach the paper patterns hanging overhead. They ignite like a fuse, racing across the ceiling in a line of fire that moves faster than she can track. The room goes from normal to nightmare in the time it takes to blink. Someone screams, then everyone screams. The 8th floor workers have slightly better luck than you will. They see the fire immediately. They have those crucial 3 minutes of warning. Some of them run for the Greene Street stairs and make it down. Some run for the elevators and squeeze into cars already packed beyond capacity. Some grab the fire hose mounted on the wall, turn the valve, and discover what you already know. The hose is rotted, the valve is rusted, the water pressure is a joke. The fire doesn't care about water pressure. Samuel Bernstein, the manager, tries to fight the flames with buckets of water. He might as well be spitting at a forest fire. The cotton scraps burn so hot and fast that water evaporates before it hits the source. The flames jump from table to table, basket to basket, feeding on 10 years of accumulated oil and 2 months of fabric cuttings. One of the 8th floor workers, a cutter named Samuel Bernstein's brother Jacob, makes a choice. He sees the flames spreading, sees the crowd crushing toward the exits, and decides his best chance is the elevator shaft. He forces open the doors and jumps, hoping to land on top of an elevator car rising from below. He miscalculates. The car is farther down than he thought. Jacob Bernstein falls 9 stories down the shaft and dies on impact. His body will be found days later, one of 19 victims who died in or around the elevator shafts. But you don't know any of this yet. You're on the 9th floor, 1 flight up, still bent over your sewing machine. The clock on the wall reads 4:43 p.m. In your mind, you're already walking home. Already sitting at the dinner table, already anywhere but here. Then you smell smoke, not the usual machine oil smoke. Something sharper, something wrong. You look up. Other girls are looking up too. The foreman is walking quickly toward the windows, his face pale. Someone shouts in Italian, "Fuoco! Fire!" The 9th floor erupts into chaos. Here's what's happening below you, in the space you can't see. The 8th floor is an inferno. Flames have consumed the wooden tables, the wicker baskets, the hanging fabric. They're climbing the walls, racing across the ceiling, feeding on everything combustible. The heat is so intense that the windows are beginning to crack. Glass pops and shatters, feeding oxygen to the fire, making it burn hotter and faster. But the fire isn't content with the 8th floor. Fire rises, heat rises, smoke rises, and in the Asch building there are plenty of ways for fire to travel upward. The elevator shafts act like chimneys, drawing smoke and flame up from the 8th floor to the 9th. The stairwells do the same. Even the spaces between the floorboards, gaps where the wood has shrunk and warped over the years, allow heat and embers to seep through. You're standing in a room directly above a fire that's burning at temperatures exceeding 1,400 degrees Fahrenheit. The floor beneath your feet is getting hot. Not uncomfortable yet, just warm, like standing on pavement in summer, but it's getting warmer. The first sign of real danger comes through the windows. You see smoke rising from below, billowing up past the 9th floor windows in thick black clouds. It looks surreal, smoke rising past you, as if the building is bleeding darkness into the sky. Then you see flames. They're licking up the exterior wall of the building, reaching the 9th floor windows like grasping fingers. The heat from below is so intense that it's igniting the wooden window frames, the fabric hanging near the windows, anything flammable within reach. Someone screams, "Get out! Everyone out!" 260 people surge toward the exit simultaneously. Listen to the sound. It's not orderly. It's not calm. It's the sound of prey animals realizing they're trapped. High-pitched screams, guttural shouts, the thunder of feet pounding on wooden floors. Chairs topple, sewing machines crash, women shove and claw and fight their way toward the stairs. You're caught in the crush. Bodies press against you from all sides. You can barely breathe. Your feet leave the ground for a moment as the crowd surges forward, carrying you like a wave. You're moving, but not by choice. You're being pushed, shoved, carried by the momentum of terror. The 9th floor has 4 potential exits: the Greene Street staircase, the Washington Place staircase, the 2 elevators, and the fire escape. Let's talk about what happens at each one. The Greene Street staircase is on the eastern side of the building. It's one of those narrow enclosed staircases, 3 feet wide, steep, with a metal handrail that's already hot to the touch. But it's open, it's accessible, and it leads up. Up is the direction of life. About 70 workers on the 9th floor are close enough to the Greene Street stairs to reach them before the fire blocks the path. They run for the stairway, squeeze through the door, and start climbing. Not down, up. To the roof. This seems counterintuitive. Fire is below you. Why climb toward the sky instead of the street? Because the Greene Street stairs lead to the 10th floor, and from there to the roof. And on the roof you can cross to the adjacent building, New York University's law school, where students and professors are already setting up ladders to bridge the gap. The workers who reach the Greene Street stairs early, the ones closest to that exit when the alarm goes up, will survive. They'll climb through smoke, through heat that makes their lungs scream, up stairs that are already beginning to warp from the temperature. But they'll make it. They'll reach the roof, cross the ladder, and collapse on the other side, coughing and crying and alive. But you're not near the Greene Street stairs. You're on the Washington Place side of the room, and that's where the real nightmare begins. You fight your way through the crowd toward the Washington Place staircase. It's the closest exit. It should be your salvation. You've used this staircase 100 times. Every day when you arrive for work, you climb up these stairs from the street entrance. But that was when you were entering the building. Now you need to leave, and leaving requires going through a door that's been locked since this morning. The first workers reach the door at the bottom of the Washington Place stairs. They grab the handle, they pull, nothing happens. They pull harder, they twist the knob, they throw their weight against the wood. The door doesn't budge. It's not stuck, it's not jammed, it's locked. Locked from the outside, with a key that's somewhere else. Maybe in a foreman's pocket, maybe hanging on a hook on another floor, maybe in the hands of someone who's already escaped or died. More workers pile up behind the door. The stairs are narrow, only 3 feet wide, and people are pushing from above, desperate to get down, unaware that the exit's blocked. The crowd becomes a compressor. Bodies crush together. The air gets squeezed out of your lungs. You're in that crowd now. You've fought your way down the stairs, and now you're trapped in a press of human bodies so tight you can't move your arms. You can't turn around. You can barely breathe. The smell is overwhelming. Sweat and smoke and fear. A smell you'll never forget if you survive, which you probably won't. Someone near the front is screaming, "It's locked! The door is locked! We can't get out!" The panic intensifies. People start pushing harder, trying to force their way through bodies, through the door, through anything. The pressure is crushing. You feel ribs compressing. Your vision starts to tunnel. Behind you, smoke is filling the stairwell. It's not the clean, white smoke from a campfire. It's thick, black, toxic smoke. Carbon monoxide, hydrogen cyanide, all the chemical byproducts of burning cotton and oil and wood and wicker. It's poison. Every breath you take is killing you a little bit. The heat is rising too. The fire has reached the 9th floor. You can't see it yet, but you can feel it. A wave of heat pressing against your back, making your clothes stick to your skin with sweat, making it even harder to breathe the increasingly thin air. At the front of the crowd, workers are still fighting with the door. Some are trying to break it down. Some are screaming for help. Some have given up screaming and are just hammering with their fists, a futile gesture that achieves nothing except bloody knuckles. 40 workers will die at this door. 40 bodies will be found piled against the locked Washington Place exit, suffocated by smoke, trampled by panic, crushed by the weight of other bodies, burned when the flames finally reach this corner. You might be one of them, or you might make a different choice. Some workers realize the Washington Place door is hopeless. They turn around, difficult in the crush, nearly impossible, and fight their way back up the stairs, back into the burning factory floor. They're choosing between two deaths: burn here at the door or try something else. Anything else. You make that choice. You claw your way backward through the crowd, ignoring the screams and curses, ignoring the people who can't believe you're going the wrong direction. You push back up the stairs, back into the smoke, back into the fire. You emerge onto the 9th floor and immediately understand why people were fleeing. The room is burning. Not everywhere yet. The fire is still spreading, but enough. Enough to know you're running out of time. Flames have climbed up through the floorboards in several places, creating islands of fire across the factory floor. The wicker baskets are burning like torches. The hanging fabric is catching fire, creating curtains of flame that drop and spread. The paper patterns overhead are gone, consumed in the first minute. Workers are running in different directions, each chasing their own desperate plan. Some are heading for the elevator shafts. Some are trying to reach the fire escape. Some are simply standing still, paralyzed by terror, watching their own deaths approach and unable to move. You have to choose. Elevators, fire escape, or windows. Those are your options. The stairs are blocked by fire or by locked doors. You have maybe 2 minutes before the entire floor is an inferno. What do? The elevators are in the center of the building, 2 shafts, 2 cars. One is a freight elevator operated by a man named Gaspar Mortillalo. The other is a passenger elevator operated by Joseph Zito. Both men are heroes. Both men will make multiple trips into the burning building, cramming their elevator cars beyond capacity, descending through smoke so thick they can barely see, rising again to rescue more workers. They'll do this again and again until the heat becomes unbearable and the cars stop functioning. But there's a problem. The elevators can only hold about 12 people comfortably. Maybe 15 if everyone squeezes tight and nobody panics. There are more than 200 people on the 9th floor. Do the math. Even if both elevators make 10 trips, which they won't, because the machinery will fail, because the heat will become too intense, because at some point even heroes have to save themselves. They can't rescue everyone. You run toward the elevator shafts. So do 100 other workers. You reach the doors just as one of the cars arrives. You can hear the machinery whining, see the cables moving through the gap in the doors. The elevator stops at the 9th floor. The doors open. Joseph Zito is inside, his face blackened with smoke, his eyes wide with terror and determination. He shouts, "Get in! Hurry!" Workers surge forward. You're pushed into the car by the momentum of bodies behind you. The car fills instantly. 15 people, 20, 25. Bodies packed so tight you can't fall down even if you wanted to. Someone's elbow is jammed into your ribs. Someone else's face is pressed against your shoulder. The smell of fear is overwhelming. Zito shouts, "That's all, no more!" But more workers are trying to squeeze in. Hands grab at the elevator gate. Someone catches their dress in the closing doors. Zito has to reverse the gate, pull the woman back out into the burning factory, then close the doors again. As the elevator begins to descend, you hear screaming from above. Workers who couldn't fit in the car. Workers who are now stuck on the 9th floor watching their escape literally drop away beneath them. Some of those workers make a terrible decision. They jump into the elevator shaft, hoping to land on top of the descending car, hoping for any chance of survival. Most of them miss. They fall 9 stories straight down the shaft and die on impact. 19 bodies will be found at the bottom of the elevator shafts. People who jumped or fell or were pushed in the panic. But you're in the car. You're descending. Through the elevator shaft, you can see fire through the gaps. Flames licking through the doors on the 8th floor, smoke billowing up like a chimney. The heat is intense. You can feel it through the metal walls of the car. Your skin prickles. Your lungs burn with every breath. The elevator passes the 7th floor, the 6th, the 5th. You're going to make it. You're going to survive. You're one of the lucky ones. The car reaches the ground floor, the doors open. Policemen and firefighters are there, pulling people out, shouting orders. You stumble out of the elevator into fresh air, into daylight, into life. Behind you, Joseph Cito closes the doors and starts ascending again. He'll make this trip 4 or 5 times before the cables burn through and the elevator becomes unusable. He'll save dozens of people, but not everyone, not even close to everyone. Let's talk about the fire escape. The fire escape on the Asch building is a joke. Not a funny joke, a deadly one. It's a narrow iron ladder bolted to the exterior wall on the Greene Street side. It descends 9 stories at a steep angle, barely wider than a single person. At the bottom, it stops at the 2nd floor, dangling above a glass skylight 20 feet above the alley. This fire escape was approved by the building department as adequate for a building with 500 workers. This tells you everything you need to know about building codes in 1911. About 25 workers make it to the fire escape. They climb out the 9th floor window, difficult in long skirts and button-up boots, and step onto the narrow iron platform. It's already crowded. People are pressed together, clinging to the railings, beginning the descent. The first few people down move quickly. They're motivated by the heat at their backs, the smoke pouring out the windows, the screams of workers still trapped inside. They descend the ladder as fast as the steep angle allows, then physics intervenes. The fire escape was designed for orderly evacuation, one person at a time, moving slowly, distributing weight evenly. It was not designed for 25 panicked workers crowding onto it simultaneously, fighting for position, moving as fast as terror allows. The bolts holding the fire escape to the building are old, corroded. They've been exposed to 10 years of rain and snow and summer heat. Nobody has inspected them. Nobody has maintained them. They're supposed to hold maybe 500 pounds of distributed weight. 25 people weigh approximately 3,000 pounds. For a moment the fire escape holds. Metal groans, iron bends. Then, with a sound like a gunshot, the bolts rip free from the brick wall. The entire fire escape, all 9 stories of it, tears away from the building and plunges into the alley below. 25 people ride it down, screaming, clinging to railings that won't save them. The structure hits the concrete at terminal velocity and crumples like aluminum foil. Bodies slam into pavement. The twisted metal structure lands on top of them, trapping some, crushing others. A few people survive the initial impact. Broken bones, internal injuries, but alive. Then the fire escape, superheated from the flames, begins burning them. They scream for help that will arrive too late. 25 people dead, just like that, in the time it takes to snap your fingers. One moment they're escaping, the next they're corpses in an alley, dying alone or dying together, but definitely dying. You might have been on that fire escape. You might have been one of the ones who climbed out the window, believing in the promise of steel and rivets and building codes. But you weren't fast enough, or you chose a different direction, or luck intervened. Now there is no fire escape. That option is gone, eliminated. Everyone still on the 9th floor has 3 choices. The Greene Street stairs, if you can reach them through the fire, the elevators, if they're still running, or the windows. The windows are where hope goes to die. By 4:50 p.m., 10 minutes after the fire started, the 9th floor is fully engulfed. Flames have spread across the entire room. The wooden tables are burning, the floorboards are burning, the walls are burning, the ceiling is burning, everything that can burn is burning, the heat is beyond anything you can imagine. It's not just hot, it's murderous, the kind of heat that makes your eyebrows singe off. That makes your clothes start to smoulder before they catch fire. That makes the air itself feel solid, unbreathable, like trying to inhale molten glass. The smoke is worse. It's everywhere, thick as fog, black as midnight. You can't see 3 feet in front of you. Your eyes are streaming tears. Your lungs are screaming. Every breath feels like drowning. Workers who haven't escaped yet are being driven toward the windows, not by choice, by necessity. The fire is pushing you backward step by step, away from the exits, away from the stairs, toward the only open space left, the windows overlooking Washington Place and Greene Street. You reach a window. Fresh air hits your face. Beautiful, cool, breathable air. For a moment you just stand there, gasping, clearing the smoke from your lungs, feeling the March wind on your skin. It's 50 degrees outside, it feels like heaven. Then you look down. You're 9 stories up, maybe 90 feet above the street. Down below you can see people gathering, a crowd forming, watching the building burn. You can see firefighters arriving, dragging hoses, raising ladders. The ladders don't reach. They stop at the 6th floor, 3 stories below you. There's a 30-foot gap between the top of the ladder and your window. Might as well be 30 miles. Behind you the fire roars. The heat is unbearable. Your dress is starting to smoke. Your hair is starting to singe. In maybe 30 seconds you're going to catch fire. In 60 seconds you're going to be dead from smoke inhalation or burning or both. You have a choice. Stay here and burn to death. Or jump. It's not really a choice, is it? The fire makes the decision for you. Your body's survival instinct overrides rational thought. You're burning. You need to escape the fire. Your hindbrain doesn't care about the 90-foot drop. It just knows. Get away from the heat. You climb onto the window ledge. The wind catches your hair, your dress. For a moment, you pause. You look down at the crowd below, at the firefighters spreading safety nets, at the pavement that's getting closer as you lean forward. The safety nets are a lie. They're designed for falls of maybe 30 feet, 40 at most. They're made of canvas and rope, held by firefighters at the corners. They're supposed to catch falling bodies and cushion the impact, but you're falling from 90 feet. You'll hit terminal velocity before you reach the net, about 50 miles per hour. That's enough force to punch straight through canvas, to break every bone in your body, to kill you instantly. The firefighters know this. They spread the nets anyway, because what else can they do? They can't reach you with ladders. They can't stop you from jumping. All they can do is try to catch you and hope physics is kinder than it usually is. Physics is not kind. You jump. Or maybe you fall. Or maybe the fire pushes you. It doesn't matter. The result is the same. You fall for approximately 3 seconds. 3 seconds to think about your mother, your sister, the boy you liked, the dinner you'll never eat, the life you'll never live. 3 seconds that feel like 3 hours and 3 milliseconds simultaneously. Then you hit the net, or the pavement, or another body that jumped before you. The impact kills you instantly. Massive trauma, every major bone fractured, internal organs ruptured. Death is immediate, which is the only mercy the day offers. 62 people jump from the Triangle factory windows. Some jump alone, some jump in pairs, holding hands, choosing to die together rather than apart. Some are already on fire when they jump, trailing smoke like comets as they fall. A reporter named William Shepherd stands on the street watching. He counts the bodies as they fall. Later, he'll write the most famous eyewitness account of the disaster. I saw more horror in 15 minutes than I could have seen in a lifetime. He describes watching 2 young women appear at a 9th floor window. They're holding hands. They look down at the crowd, at the nets, at the impossible distance. Then they step off the ledge together, still holding hands, falling as one. They hit the pavement, still holding hands. Their bodies bounce once, then lie still. Another woman appears at a window. She's clearly trying to decide whether to jump. She looks down, looks back at the fire, looks down again. Smoke is billowing out the window around her. She starts to climb down the outside of the building, actually trying to climb down the brick wall, looking for handholds, for anything. She makes it about 10 feet before her grip fails. She falls, screaming, and dies on the sidewalk. A man, one of the 23 male victims, jumps from a Greene Street window. He's fully engulfed in flames as he falls. The fire doesn't go out during the fall. He's still burning when he hits the pavement. The bodies pile up, literally pile up. The first jumpers hit the pavement and die. The next jumpers land on the bodies of the first ones, then more bodies, then more. They stack like cordwood on the sidewalk, and the firefighters have to work around them, around the dead, to fight the fire. One young woman catches on a hook at the 6th floor as she falls, part of a sign that says Myers Crown Wallock High Standard Clothing. She hangs there, burning, screaming, for what feels like an eternity but is probably 20 seconds. Then a dress burns through and she drops the rest of the way down. By 5 p.m, the jumping stops. Not because the fire is out, it's still burning, but because everyone who could jump has jumped. Everyone who remains inside is already dead. The fire burns for 18 minutes total, from 4:40 p.m. when the cigarette hits the scrap bin to 4:58 p.m. when the last flame is extinguished. 18 minutes. In those 18 minutes, 146 people die. Approximately 54 jump or fall to their deaths. About 50 burn or suffocate inside the factory. Roughly 19 die in or around the elevator shafts. Around 25 die when the fire escape collapses. The youngest victim is 14 years old. Kate Leone and Sarah Maltese, both the same age. The oldest is 43, Providenza Pano. Most are young women between 16 and 23. Most are Italian or Jewish immigrants who came to America believing in promises that nobody kept. The Asch building itself survives almost undamaged. The steel frame holds, the concrete floors hold, the terracotta exterior is barely scorched. Within months, the building will be reoccupied by other businesses, including other garment factories. Fireproof meant the building wouldn't fall down. It didn't mean the people inside wouldn't burn. Max Blank and Isaac Harris, the owners, survive. They were on the 10th floor when the fire started, and they received a phone warning from the 8th floor. They gathered their families and walked up to the roof, crossed over to the NYU building and descended to safety. Not a scratch, not a burn, not even a cough from smoke inhalation. Their children survived. Their workers didn't. That night, as bodies are being pulled from the wreckage, as families are gathering at the morgue to identify charred remains, as the city struggles to process what just happened, Blank and Harris are in their offices calculating insurance claims. They're heavily insured, suspiciously heavily insured. They'll collect about $60,000 above their actual losses, roughly $400 per dead worker. Tomorrow, the grief will start. The identification process will begin. Families standing over coffins, trying to recognize daughters and sisters from jewellery or shoe repairs, or the braids they plaited that morning. 100,000 people will line up to view the bodies. 7 will never be identified, and will be buried in a common grave. Next week there will be a funeral. 120,000 people will march through Manhattan in the largest funeral procession the city has ever seen. They'll carry signs reading, "We mourn our 146 dead, and we demand fire safety." In 9 months, there will be a trial. Blank and Harris will be charged with manslaughter, accused of locking the Washington Place door, of causing death through negligence. Max Stier, the best defense attorney money can buy, will get them acquitted after less than 2 hours of jury deliberation. Justice will not be served. It rarely is for the poor, the immigrant, the powerless. But something else will happen, something unprecedented. The Triangle Fire will become a catalyst for the greatest wave of workplace safety reform in American history. Between 1911 and 1914, New York will pass more than 30 new labour laws, more than any comparable period before or since. The laws will require sprinklers, unlocked doors, fire drills, fireproof stairs, factory inspections. The 146 dead will buy safety for millions of future workers. Their deaths will mean something. That's cold comfort to their families, but it's something. The last survivor, Rose Friedman, will die in 2001 at age 107. She'll spend her entire adult life speaking about the fire, keeping the memory alive. It's important that people remember, she'll say, because if they forget, it will happen again. She was right. It has happened again. Factory fires in Bangladesh, building collapses in Pakistan, workplace disasters wherever owners decide that safety is expensive and workers are cheap. History doesn't repeat exactly, but it rhymes. Tonight, as you lie in your bed, safe and warm, think about those 146 people. Think about the 19-year-old girl who woke up on March 25th, 1911, thinking about dinner and her sister and the dress she wanted to buy. Think about how she died screaming, trapped behind a locked door or falling from a window or crushed in a stairwell. Think about how it could have been prevented with 3 minutes warning, with unlocked doors, with fire drills, with owners who cared more about life than profit. And ask yourself, what locked doors exist today? What warnings are being ignored? What triangle fires are waiting to happen because we've forgotten the lessons written in ash and blood? Don't forget them. Don't let their deaths mean nothing. Don't let history repeat because we weren't paying attention. The fire is out. The bodies are buried. But the question remains, what will you do to make sure it never happens again? William Shepherd is standing on the corner of Washington Place and Greene Street when the first body falls. He's a reporter for United Press, 28 years old, notebook in hand, trying to understand what's happening above him. One moment he's watching smoke pour from ninth floor windows. The next moment, something dark tumbles past those windows and accelerates toward the pavement. His brain needs a second to process what his eyes are seeing. That's not debris. That's not fabric or a wicker basket. That's a person. A human being. Arms and legs pinwheeling, dress billowing like a parachute that isn't working, falling at a speed that makes his stomach drop in sympathy. The body hits the sidewalk 15 feet away from him with a sound he'll never forget. Not a thud, not a crash. Something wet and final, like a watermelon dropped from a roof. The impact is so violent that the body bounces, actually bounces, before settling into stillness. Shepherd stands frozen, staring. His notebook dangles from numb fingers. He's a reporter. He's seen things, but he's never seen this. He's never watched a young woman choose death by falling over death by burning, and then witnessed the mathematical inevitability of what happens when a 100-pound body strikes concrete after falling 90 feet. Around him, the crowd surges forward. Some people scream. Some people just stop and stare, mouths open, unable to process what they're witnessing. A woman faints. A man vomits into the gutter. Children stand on tiptoes trying to see over the adults, not understanding yet what they're looking at. Then another body appears at a window, and another. They're not falling accidentally. They're jumping, deliberately choosing this death over the alternative burning alive behind them. Shepherd will later write that he counted 62 people jump from the triangle windows. He'll write that some jumped alone, some in pairs holding hands. He'll write about watching two girls appear at a window together, look down at the impossible distance, then step off the ledge as one unit, still clutching each other, falling as a single shape. He'll write, "I saw more horror in 15 minutes than I could have seen in a lifetime." But right now, in this moment, he's not writing. He's just watching bodies tumble past windows, watching dresses catch fire mid-fall, watching the sidewalk become a graveyard, watching firefighters spread safety nets that can't possibly work because the physics are all wrong. The falling bodies carry too much force, hit with too much velocity, and the canvas just rips. One firefighter tries to catch a falling woman in his arms. The impact knocks him flat, breaks bones in both their bodies. They lie tangled together on the pavement, both broken, one dead and one wishing he were. Engine company 18 and ladder company 20 arrive within minutes of the first alarm. They're fast, they're professional, they're trained for exactly this scenario. High-rise fire, trapped workers, multiple casualties. They're also completely inadequate for what they're facing. Chief Edward Croker stands on the street looking up at the burning building, calculating the problem. The fire is on the 8th and 9th floors. His longest ladder extends to the 6th floor. That leaves a 3-story gap, approximately 30 feet, between the top of his ladder and the people who need rescuing. 30 feet might as well be 30 miles. His men drag hoses toward the building and connect them to hydrants. They get water flowing and aim the streams upward. The water pressure is good, strong enough to reach the 8th floor. By the time it reaches the 9th floor, though, it's a pathetic trickle, barely more than a garden hose spray. It does nothing to the flames roaring out the windows. Croker watches bodies fall. He watches his men spread nets. He watches the nets fail. One body hits a net with such force that it rips straight through and continues to the pavement below. Another body hits the edge of a net, bounces off and lands on the sidewalk anyway. A third lands perfectly in the centre of a properly held net, and the force is so great that the firefighters holding the edges are yanked forward, several of them injured, and the body hits the ground anyway. The nets are designed for falls from 6 floors, maybe 7 in ideal conditions. These people are falling from 9 floors. They're hitting terminal velocity. The impact generates tons of force. No canvas net, no matter how strong, can stop that kind of momentum. Croker realizes quickly that he's not fighting a fire. He's witnessing a massacre. There's nothing his men can do except watch and try to collect the bodies afterward. This is the frustration that will haunt him forever. He arrived quickly. He brought the right equipment. His men did everything correctly. And it didn't matter. The building was too tall. The fire was too fast. The exits were too few. By the time his engines arrived, most of the victims were already dead or dying. Later, Croker will tell reporters, "This is the worst fire I've ever seen, and I've been fighting fires in the city for 30 years. By 5 p.m., maybe 5,000 people have gathered around the Asch building. They come from every direction, office workers leaving nearby buildings, shopkeepers closing up for the day, residents from the tenements, students from New York University, random pedestrians drawn by sirens and smoke. They form a massive crowd that police officers struggle to control. Everyone wants to get closer. Everyone wants to see. It's human nature, the same impulse that makes people slow down to look at car accidents, that makes disasters into spectacles. But this is different. Many people in this crowd know someone who works at Triangle. The garment industry employs tens of thousands of people in Lower Manhattan. Everyone has a cousin or a sister or a neighbour or a friend who might be in that building right now. So the crowd isn't just watching, they're searching. Every face at a window might be someone they love. Every body that falls might be someone they know. The sound of the crowd is extraordinary. It starts as a low murmur, confused conversations, people asking each other what's happening. Then it rises to a roar as the first bodies begin to fall, screams of horror, shouts of disbelief. Then it settles into something worse, a kind of collective keening, a sound of grief so profound it's almost physical. Women wail, men sob openly, children cry without understanding why. The sound fills Washington Place like a living thing, echoing off the buildings, mixing with the roar of flames and the shouts of firefighters and the crash of bodies hitting pavement. Police officer James Meehan fights his way through the crowd toward the building's street-level entrance. He's trying to get inside, trying to reach the stairways, trying to save anyone he can. The crowd is so dense he can barely move. People grab at him, asking about relatives, demanding information he doesn't have. He finally reaches the Greene Street entrance and runs inside. The stairway is filling with smoke, but it's not yet impassable. He starts climbing, taking the stairs 2 at a time, heading toward the fire. He makes it to the 6th floor before the heat and smoke force him back. He can't go higher. The stairway above him is an inferno. Anyone still up there is beyond help. On his way down, he passes several survivors stumbling through the smoke. Workers who escaped down the Greene Street stairs before the fire blocked the route. He helps them, guides them, gets them outside to safety. It's something. It's not enough. It's never enough. Let's talk about what's happening on the 10th floor while the 9th floor burns. Max Blank and Isaac Harris, the owners of the Triangle Waste Company, are on the 10th floor when the fire starts. So are their families, wives, children, even Max Blank's 2 young daughters who came to visit Papa at work. At approximately 4:43 p.m, someone from the 8th floor calls the 10th floor on the internal telephone system. The message is brief. Fire. Get out. The 10th floor receives 3 minutes of warning that the 9th floor never gets. 3 minutes that mean the difference between life and death. Blank and Harris react immediately. They gather their families. They alert the workers on the 10th floor. They move quickly but not panickedly toward the Greene Street stairs. They climb up, not down, up to the roof. This is the correct decision. The fire is below them. Down leads into flames and smoke. Up leads to open air and safety. From the roof, they can cross a ladder to the adjacent building, then descend to the street through a building that isn't burning. Blank and Harris and their families make it to the roof safely. So do most of the 10th floor workers. About 70 people escape via this route. They climb through smoke, they're scared. Some suffer minor burns, but they live. Not one member of the Blank or Harris families is seriously injured. Not one dies. Their children will grow up, attend college, live full lives. They'll inherit money and businesses and family names untainted by personal tragedy. Meanwhile, one floor below, their employees are dying by the dozens. The contrast is obscene. The owners, who created the conditions that made this fire deadly, the locked doors, the inadequate exits, the fabric scraps piled for months, the lack of fire drills, they escape unharmed. The workers, who did nothing except show up to work for poverty wages in unsafe conditions, they die screaming. This is the injustice that will fuel public outrage. This is the fact that makes the Triangle fire feel less like an accident and more like a crime. The people responsible for safety walked away. The people who had no control over safety burned to death. Sunday morning, March 26, 1911. The sun rises over New York City on a day that feels fundamentally wrong. The weather is beautiful, cool and clear, perfect early spring weather. But something terrible happened yesterday and everyone knows it. The bodies from the Triangle fire have been transported to the Charities Pier at the foot of East 26th Street. The pier is officially called the Municipal Charities Pier, but New Yorkers have another name for it, Misery Lane. This is where the city puts bodies after disasters, shipwrecks, building collapses, fires. This is where families come to identify their dead. By 8 a.m, a line has already formed outside the pier. By 10 a.m, the line stretches 3 blocks. By noon, it contains thousands of people, maybe 10,000, maybe more. The police lose count. Some are legitimate searchers, parents looking for daughters, siblings looking for sisters and brothers, spouses looking for partners. They carry photographs, clutch handkerchiefs, lean on each other for support. Their faces show a kind of grief that's almost physical. A pain so deep it manifests in the body. Slumped shoulders, shuffling feet, eyes red from crying or from not crying, because they've moved beyond tears into some realm where grief transcends expression. But others are just curious. Gawkers, disaster tourists, people who read about the fire in this morning's newspapers and decided to spend their Sunday viewing corpses. Young couples treating it like a date. He holds her hand while they wait in line. She giggles nervously. Neither quite understands that what they're about to see will haunt them forever. The police try to weed out the ghouls. Officer Mary Gray, stationed at the entrance, has developed what she calls a searching eye. She looks at each person approaching and makes a judgment. Genuine grief or morbid curiosity. The truly bereaved have a particular quality, she explains. A hollowness, a desperation. She lets them through. The others get turned away. Inside the pier, the scene is medieval. 146 coffins arranged in 2 long rows under a high ceiling. Weak daylight filters through small windows high on the walls. The smell is overwhelming, burned flesh and chemical preservatives and death itself. A smell that has texture and weight, that clings to clothes and hair and the inside of your mouth. The bodies are propped up in their coffins. Someone decided this would aid identification, allowing families to see the faces more clearly. But it creates a grotesque theatre. Rows of corpses sitting at attention, like guests at a horrible dinner party. Faces turned toward the living, waiting to be recognised. Policemen stand every few feet holding lanterns. When a family member leans close to examine a body, the nearest officer dangles his lantern helpfully. The light flickers and sways, making shadows dance across ruined faces. Some bodies are relatively intact. Jumpers who landed on their backs, their faces preserved even if everything else is broken. These are the easy identifications. A mother sees her daughter's face and screams recognition. A brother sees his sister and collapses. These are clear, certain, final. Other bodies are burned beyond recognition. Fire doesn't just kill, it transforms. It melts flesh, fuses clothing to skin, turns human beings into objects that barely resemble what they were. These identifications require detective work. Jewellery that survived the flames, a distinctive shoe style, a mended stocking, braided hair that somehow remained intact when everything else burned away. Dominic Leone walks slowly down the rows of coffins. He's looking for 3 people. His 2 cousins, Annie Coletti and Nicolina Nicolosci, and his 14-year-old niece Kate Leone. All 3 worked at Triangle. None came home yesterday. He finds Nicolina fairly quickly. Her body landed on pavement rather than falling into fire. She's broken but recognisable. Leone nods to the morgue workers. Yes, that's Nicolina. They close the coffin, write her name on a tag, prepare paperwork for the mortuary. 1 found, 2 still missing. Leone continues walking. He's accompanied by his Aunt Rose, Annie's mother. They move slowly, stopping at each coffin that might contain someone who matches the description. Young woman, Italian, approximately 20 years old. There are dozens of such bodies. They stop at 1 coffin. The contents don't look human, just a charred shape, vaguely person-shaped, propped against pillows. Everything identifying is gone. Face, hair, clothing, anything that might trigger recognition. This could be Annie, or Kate, or neither, or someone else's daughter entirely. Leone stares at the body for a long time. His aunt stares too. They're trying to force recognition through sheer willpower. They're searching for any detail, a ring, a tooth, the shape of a hand, anything that might confirm identity. Finally, Aunt Rose decides, yes, that's Annie. She's not certain, but she chooses to be certain because uncertainty is unbearable, because her daughter is missing and this body needs to be claimed, and maybe if she says it's Annie, then at least she'll know. At least she can bury her daughter. At least the not knowing will end. Leone isn't convinced. He can't match the burned remains with his memory of his cousin's living face, but he doesn't seriously protest. Maybe his aunt is right. Maybe this is Annie. Or maybe it's easier to believe that than to keep searching, keep wondering, keep walking past rows of bodies that might or might not be people you love. The coffin is labelled with Annie's name and prepared for burial. But that night, lying awake, Aunt Rose keeps thinking about the body. Gradually her certainty erodes. By morning she's convinced she was wrong. That wasn't Annie. Or maybe it was, but now she's not sure and the doubt is worse than the grief. She returns to the morgue and announces her mistake. The coffin is recalled from the mortuary, relabelled as unidentified, and returned to the line of unclaimed dead. Annie is missing again. Kate is still missing. Leone and his aunt must keep searching, keep hoping, keep walking past coffins that contain daughters who will never grow old. This scene repeats across the city with variations, families torn between the need to know and the impossibility of knowing. Bodies so destroyed that identification becomes guesswork. Parents forced to choose which burned corpse belongs to their child based on evidence that wouldn't convince anyone in a less desperate situation. By Wednesday, March 29th, most victims have been identified and claimed by families, but 16 bodies remain in the morgue, labelled only with numbers. These are the most badly burned, the most thoroughly destroyed. Or they're people who have no family in America, immigrants who came alone, who worked and lived and died without anyone to claim them. The city must decide what to do with these unclaimed dead. They can't remain at Misery Lane forever. But where do you bury someone when you don't know who they are? The garment workers' unions step forward with an answer. We'll bury them. These workers might be unidentified, but they're not anonymous. They're union sisters and brothers, fellow workers, members of the movement. They'll get a proper funeral with dignity and public recognition. The funeral is scheduled for April 5th, nearly 2 weeks after the fire. It will be a procession through Manhattan from the Lower East Side to Brooklyn. The 7 remaining unidentified bodies, one was identified in October as Catherine Maltese, will be carried in hearses. Behind them will march the workers of New York. On the morning of April 5th, rain falls cold and steady. Grey sky, temperature in the 40s, wind that cuts through cheap coats. It's miserable weather for a funeral. But the rain doesn't stop people from coming. They gather by the thousands, then tens of thousands, then more. Estimates vary wildly. Some newspapers report 80,000, others report 120,000, some claim even more. Whatever the exact number, It's enormous. It's the largest funeral procession in New York City history to that point. 7 hearses lead the procession, each carrying an unidentified victim. Behind them come the survivors, wearing black armbands, limping on injured legs, faces still showing burns. Behind them come union members carrying signs, "We mourn our 146 dead, and we demand fire safety, and how many more must die." Behind them come family members of identified victims. Many carry photographs, daughters frozen forever at 16 or 19 or 22, smiling faces that will never age. These photographs are unbearable to look at. Young women full of life and hope, captured in moments when they believed their futures extended indefinitely forward. None of them knew that their life expectancy could be measured in months or weeks or days. And behind the families come the workers, garment workers and factory workers and shop workers and office workers, immigrants and native-born Americans, Jews and Italians and Irish and Germans, socialists and anarchists and Democrats and people who've never voted because they're too poor or too female or too foreign to qualify. They march in silence, mostly. No chants, no songs. Just the sound of thousands of feet hitting wet pavement in a rhythm that sounds like a heartbeat, or maybe like a dirge. The rain continues falling, soaking clothes, streaming down faces that are already wet with tears. The procession takes hours. It winds through the Lower East Side, past tenements where victims lived, past factories where thousands more still work in identical conditions, through Union Square where labour rallies have been held for decades, then up Fifth Avenue, past the mansions of the wealthy, past buildings where people who've never worked a day in their lives look out windows at this river of grief flowing past their doors. Some wealthy spectators weep. Anne Morgan, daughter of financier J.P. Morgan, one of the richest women in America, stands at her window watching the procession, tears streaming down her face. She thinks about the strike, about the workers she met, about how she felt so progressive for supporting their demands. And then they died behind locked doors. And what did her support accomplish? What did any of their support mean when balanced against 146 corpses? Frances Perkins watches too. She stands in the rain for hours, bearing witness. She's determined to remember every detail of this moment because she knows it matters. Years later, as Secretary of Labour under Franklin Roosevelt, she'll cite this funeral as a turning point, the moment when she truly understood what her life's work must be. The Triangle Fire creates a problem for New York's political establishment. On one hand, 146 people just died in a workplace fire. That's a disaster that demands response. On the other hand, New York in 1911 doesn't really regulate workplace safety. Factory owners are basically free to run their businesses however they want. Fires happen. Workers die. That's just how industrial capitalism works. But this fire is different. The death toll is too high. The victims are too sympathetic. Young women, immigrants, girls who came to America chasing dreams. The circumstances are too damning. Locked doors, inadequate exits, no fire drills, owners who escaped while their workers burned. The media coverage is too intense. The public outrage is too loud. Politicians realize quickly that ignoring this disaster isn't an option. Something must be done. Laws must change. Someone must be held accountable. But who and how? District Attorney Charles Whitman faces competing pressures. He could prosecute the building department for inadequate safety inspections. He could prosecute the owners for maintaining unsafe conditions. He could push for new legislation without prosecuting anyone. Each option has political implications. Whitman is ambitious. He has his eyes on higher office, maybe governor, maybe more. He needs to handle this correctly. Show too much leniency and he looks soft on crime. Show too much aggression, and he risks alienating the business community whose support he'll need for future campaigns. For the first few days, Whitman hedges. He makes statements that sound forceful without committing to any specific action. He promises investigations. He praises firefighters. He expresses sympathy for victims. He keeps his options open. Then, William Randolph Hearst's American newspaper starts attacking him. Front-page editorials demanding action. Headlines asking why the district attorney isn't moving faster. Cartoons showing him dithering while bodies pile up. Hearst has his own political ambitions. He and Whitman are rivals on the same political track. The Americans' attacks are partly about justice and partly about weakening a potential opponent. The pressure works. On March 31st, Whitman announces that he's seeking manslaughter indictments against Max Blank and Isaac Harris. The theory is straightforward. They maintained locked doors during working hours. Those locked doors directly contributed to deaths. Therefore, they're criminally liable. It's a bold move. Factory owners are rarely prosecuted for worker deaths. The prevailing attitude in 1911 is that workplace accidents are just part of doing business. Workers assume the risks when they take the job. If they don't like the conditions, they can work somewhere else. But the Triangle Fire has shifted public opinion. Suddenly, the idea that owners have responsibility for worker safety doesn't seem radical. It seems obvious. Of course, doors shouldn't be locked during working hours. Of course, factories should have adequate exits. Of course, someone should face consequences when negligence kills 146 people. On April 11th, a grand jury indicts Max Blank and Isaac Harris on charges of first and second-degree manslaughter, the specific charge causing the death of Margaret Schwartz by locking the Washington Place door. Why Margaret Schwartz specifically? Because the prosecution needs to prove a direct causal link between the locked door and a specific death. They choose Schwartz because witnesses can place her at that door, trying to escape, unable to get through because it was locked. If they can prove Blank and Harris knew the door was locked and that the locked door directly caused Schwartz's death, they can get a manslaughter conviction. And if they can convict on Schwartz, similar charges could follow for dozens of other victims. The indictment thrills reformers and horrifies the business community. On one hand, accountability. Justice. The idea that rich men can't just kill workers with impunity. On the other hand, dangerous precedent. If owners can be criminally charged every time a worker dies, how can factories operate? Accidents happen. Death is regrettable but inevitable. The trial is scheduled for December 1911, 8 months after the fire. That's a long time to wait for justice. Long enough for public outrage to fade. Long enough for memories to become unreliable. Long enough for excellent defense attorneys to craft strategies. Max Blank and Isaac Harris hire Max Steer, the most expensive and skilled defense attorney in New York. His fees are enormous, $10,000, roughly $250,000 in today's money. Where do recently ruined factory owners get that kind of money? That question will never be satisfactorily answered. Steer is brilliant. He understands that in criminal law, reasonable doubt equals acquittal. He doesn't need to prove his clients are innocent. He just needs to create uncertainty about their guilt. His strategy has 3 prongs. First, maybe the door wasn't actually locked that day. Second, even if it was locked, maybe Blank and Harris didn't know. Third, even if they knew, maybe the locked door didn't actually cause deaths. Maybe those workers would have died anyway from smoke and heat. It's a masterful defense because it introduces doubt at every level. Maybe, maybe, maybe. And in criminal court, maybe is enough. The trial will become one of the most significant criminal proceedings in American labor history. But that's still months away. For now, in the immediate aftermath of the fire, New York is still trying to process what happened, still counting bodies, still burying the dead. The question everyone is asking, how do we prevent this from happening again? The answer will reshape American labor law for generations. But first, the city must finish mourning its dead. 8 months have passed since the fire. It's December 4th, 1911, and you're standing outside the New York State Supreme Court building at 52 Chambers Street. The air is cold enough to see your breath. The sidewalk is packed with people. Survivors, family members, reporters, curiosity seekers, union organizers, society ladies wrapped in furs. Everyone wants to see what happens when rich men are put on trial for killing poor workers. Inside the courtroom, Max Blank and Isaac Harris sit beside their attorney, Max Steer. They're dressed impeccably, expensive suits, polished shoes, hair perfectly groomed. They look like successful businessmen, which is exactly what they are. They don't look like murderers. They don't look like men whose negligence killed 146 people. That's the defence's strategy in a nutshell. Make the jury see these defendants as respectable family men, not as greedy factory owners who locked doors and ignored safety regulations. The prosecution is led by Assistant District Attorney Charles Bostwick. He's competent, prepared, passionate. But he's also facing an uphill battle. In 1911, it's extremely difficult to convict factory owners of criminal negligence. The prevailing legal philosophy is that workers assume the risks of their employment. If you don't like unsafe conditions, work somewhere else. If you get hurt or killed, that's unfortunate but not criminal. Bostwick needs to prove three things. First, that the Washington Place door was locked during the fire. Second, that Blank and Harris knew it was locked. Third, that the locked door directly caused deaths. If he can prove all three beyond a reasonable doubt, he gets a conviction. The problem is, each element is harder to prove than it sounds. The trial begins with jury selection. This takes days. Steuer, the defense attorney, is brilliant at reading people. He rejects anyone who seems too sympathetic to workers, anyone who's lost family members to workplace accidents, anyone who shows even a hint of anti-business sentiment. By the time jury selection is complete, the panel consists mostly of middle-class men who own small businesses or work in management, men who identify more with employers than with employees. The odds are already tilted. Bostwick calls survivor after survivor to testify. These young women, some still bearing scars from the fire, some limping from injuries that never healed properly, climb into the witness box and tell their stories. They describe arriving for work that Saturday morning. They describe the fire breaking out. They describe the panic, the screaming, the rush toward exits, and they describe reaching the Washington Place door and finding it locked. Kate Alterman is the prosecution's star witness. She's 20 years old, worked on the 9th floor, and survived by escaping down the Greene Street stairs. She takes the stand and describes in vivid detail what she saw. Women rushing to the Washington Place door, pulling on the handle, pounding with their fists, screaming for help. The door wouldn't open, it was locked. Her testimony is powerful. She describes specific details, the colour of smoke, the sound of screaming, the heat pressing against her back. She describes seeing girls she knew, girls she'd eaten lunch with, trapped at that door. She describes making the choice to run in a different direction, toward the Greene Street stairs, and the guilt she's carried every day since for surviving when they didn't. Bostwick asks her to repeat her testimony. She does, telling the story again from the beginning. It's nearly identical to her first telling. Same details, same sequence, same emotional beats. This is where Max Steuer makes his move. He stands up for cross-examination. He's calm, almost friendly. He asks Alterman politely if she could tell her story one more time, just to make sure the jury understands completely. Alterman complies. She tells the story a third time. Again, it's nearly identical to the previous versions. Same words, same phrasing, same details in the same order. Steuer lets her finish. Then he turns to the jury with a look that says, "Does this sound like genuine memory to you? Or does it sound like a script she's memorized?" He doesn't say it out loud. He doesn't need to. The implication is clear. Alterman has been coached by the prosecution. Her testimony is too perfect, too consistent. Real memory has variations. Real people tell stories differently each time. The fact that her account is identical every time suggests it's not authentic memory. It's a performance. The jury shifts uncomfortably. They're starting to doubt. What Steuer doesn't mention, what the jury doesn't understand, is that trauma creates this kind of consistency. Alterman isn't reciting a script. She's reliving the fire. The experience burned itself into her brain with such intensity that every detail is permanent. She tells it the same way every time because that's how it exists in her memory. Unchanging, unvarying, eternal. But the jury doesn't understand trauma psychology. They just see a young woman telling the same story 3 times without variation, and they think, coached witness, unreliable testimony. Steuer has successfully planted doubt. The defence's strategy is elegant in its simplicity. Create doubt at every level. Maybe the door wasn't locked. Sure, survivors say it was locked, but memory is unreliable, especially during traumatic events. Maybe they were confused. Maybe in the chaos and smoke, they thought the door was locked when actually it was just stuck. Or they were pulling when they should have been pushing. Maybe. Even if the door was locked, maybe Blank and Harris didn't know. They weren't on the 9th floor that day. They were on the 10th floor with their families. How can you prove they knew about a locked door 1 floor below them? Maybe a low-level employee locked it without their knowledge or permission. Maybe. Even if they knew about the locked door, maybe it didn't actually cause deaths. The fire was so fast, so intense. Expert witnesses testify that the heat and smoke would have killed people within minutes regardless of exit availability. Maybe everyone near that door was already dead or dying from smoke inhalation before the locked door even mattered. Maybe. 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 In criminal law, maybe equals reasonable doubt, and reasonable doubt equals acquittal. Stoyer brings in fire experts who testify about the speed of the fire, the toxicity of the smoke, the temperature of the flames. They create a picture of a disaster so overwhelming that nothing could have prevented the deaths. The locked door becomes irrelevant in this narrative, just one factor among many, not the decisive element. The defence also plays on class sympathy. Blank and Harris aren't monsters. They're businessmen trying to run a factory in a competitive industry. They employ hundreds of workers. They provide jobs to immigrants who would otherwise be unemployed. They're pillars of the community. And yes, they sometimes lock doors. But why? To prevent theft. Because workers steal fabric and sell it. Because union organisers try to sneak into the factory to agitate. Because maintaining order and security is part of running a business. The locked door isn't evidence of murderous negligence. It's evidence of reasonable business practice. The prosecution tries to counter this narrative. They bring in evidence of previous complaints about locked doors. They show that Blank had a reputation for being obsessive about security, for personally checking that doors were locked. They demonstrate a pattern of prioritising profit over safety. But proving a pattern isn't the same as proving criminal intent for a specific death. The charges are very specific, causing the death of Margaret Schwartz by locking the Washington Place door. Everything else is just context. December 27th, 1911. 3 weeks of trial, dozens of witnesses, hundreds of pages of testimony. The jury retires to deliberate at 2:45 p.m. They return at 4:35 p.m. Less than 2 hours. That's not a good sign for the prosecution. Quick verdicts usually favour the defence. If the jury had serious doubts, if they were wrestling with the evidence, deliberations would take longer. 2 hours suggests they made their decision quickly and easily. The foreman stands. The judge asks for the verdict. Not guilty. The courtroom erupts. Survivors scream. Family members cry. Someone throws something. No one is quite sure what. Police officers rush forward to maintain order. Blank and Harris embrace their attorney. They're smiling. They're free. Outside the courthouse, the crowd is even angrier. Hundreds of people have gathered waiting for news. When word of the acquittal spreads, the mood turns dangerous. People shout for justice. Some call for vigilante action. Police form a protective cordon around Blank and Harris, escorting them quickly to waiting cars before the crowd can reach them. The New York Times will later describe the scene as near riot conditions. The anger is palpable, physical, dangerous. For a few minutes, it seems possible that the crowd might overwhelm police and dispense their own justice on the courthouse steps. But the moment passes, the cars drive away. Blank and Harris escape without injury. They've won. They faced criminal charges for causing 146 deaths, and they walked free. The legal system has declared them not guilty. In the eyes of the law, they did nothing wrong. The criminal trial is over, but the legal battle continues. 23 families file civil lawsuits seeking damages for wrongful death. Civil cases have a lower burden of proof than criminal cases. The plaintiffs don't need to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubt, just that Blank and Harris are more likely than not responsible for the deaths. These cases drag on for years. depositions, motions, delays. The same evidence gets relitigated. Was the door locked? Did the owners know? Did it cause deaths? Finally, in 1914, settlements are reached. 23 families receive compensation. The amount, $75 per death. $75. That's what the court system decided a human life was worth. That's the value placed on a 16-year-old girl who came to America chasing dreams and died screaming behind a locked door. For context, $75 is about half a year's wages for a triangle worker. It's roughly $2,000 in today's money. That's the compensation for losing a daughter, a sister, a mother. Meanwhile, Blank and Harris collect their insurance payout. They'd been heavily insured, suspiciously heavily insured, many noted. They carried about $200,000 in coverage on property, valued at maybe $120,000. After paying for damages and legal fees, they clear about $60,000 in profit above their documented losses. That's roughly $400 per dead worker. They made money from the fire that killed 146 of their employees. Let that calculation sink in for a moment. Their workers died. They profited. You might think the Triangle Fire would have ended Blank and Harris's careers. You would be wrong. Within months of the fire, they've opened a new factory, different location, same business model, same practices. In 1913, 2 years after the fire, Max Blank is caught locking doors during working hours at his new factory. A factory inspector finds the exit locked. Workers inside. Clear violation of the new laws passed after Triangle. Blank is arrested. He's brought to court. He's found guilty. The judge fines him $20. $20. The minimum possible penalty. And the judge apologises for having to fine him at all, explaining that the law requires it, but that he understands Blank is just trying to run a business efficiently. $20 for locking doors that could trap workers in a fire. Less than the cost of a nice dinner. Less than Blank probably spent on his lawyer. Less than he made in profit in the hour it took to appear in court. This is the legal system's final statement on the Triangle Fire. Not guilty of criminal charges, minimal civil penalties, and $20 fines for continuing the same practices that killed 146 people. Justice, in any meaningful sense, was never served. Blank and Harris faced no real consequences. They lived long, comfortable lives. Harris moved to California and died peacefully in his 70s. Blank continued operating factories in New York and died wealthy in his 80s. Neither ever expressed genuine remorse. Neither ever acknowledged that their decisions, their locked doors, their inadequate exits, their refusal to conduct fire drills, directly caused deaths. In their minds, they were victims of circumstance, of bad luck, of a tragic accident that could have happened to anyone. Except it wasn't an accident. It was negligence. It was a choice. Hundreds of small choices that accumulated into disaster. The choice to lock doors, the choice to ignore safety regulations, the choice to prioritise profit over human life, the choice to treat workers as disposable resources rather than as human beings with families and futures. Those choices killed 146 people. And the legal system, the political system, the economic system, all protected the men who made those choices while leaving the victims and their families with nothing but grief and $75 checks. This should be where the story ends, in injustice and impunity, and the grinding reality that in 1911 America, the powerful didn't face consequences for killing the powerless, but something unexpected happened. Something that even the cynics didn't predict. The Triangle Fire became a catalyst for change so profound it reshaped American labor law for generations. 3 months after the fire, New York Governor John Dix creates the Factory Investigating Commission. This isn't unusual. Politicians always create commissions after disasters. Commissions are how you look like you're doing something while actually doing nothing. You appoint some respected citizens, give them an impressive title, let them hold hearings and write reports, and then you quietly shelve those reports and move on. Everyone expects the Factory Investigating Commission to follow this pattern. Everyone is wrong. The commission is led by 2 men, State Senator Robert Wagner and Assembly Majority Leader Alfred E. Smith. Both are Tammany Hall Democrats, members of New York's famously corrupt political machine. Both come from working-class backgrounds. Wagner's father was a janitor. Smith grew up in a Fourth Ward tenement and left school at 14 to support his widowed mother. They remember poverty. They remember what it's like to work dangerous jobs for low pay. The Triangle Fire hits them personally in ways it doesn't hit wealthy reformers. Smith visits families in his district who lost daughters in the fire. He goes to the morgue. He helps people identify bodies. It's a human, natural thing to do. A politician connecting with constituents. But it transforms him. He sees the burned bodies. He meets the parents. He witnesses grief so profound it's almost tangible. The experience changes Smith fundamentally. He'll later say that everything he accomplished in politics, everything, including his eventual run for president, grew from that moment at the morgue, standing beside families trying to identify daughters from jewellery or shoe repairs, because fire had burned away everything else. Wagner and Smith take the Factory Investigating Commission seriously. They hire investigators. They conduct surprise inspections of factories across New York State. They subpoena witnesses. They hold public hearings where workers testify about conditions. They visit tenements to see how workers live. Most importantly, they bring other legislators with them. Wagner and Smith drag their wealthy uptown colleagues into the Lower East Side, into sweatshops and tenement apartments, forcing them to see conditions they've only read about in newspapers. One investigation becomes legendary. Smith crawls through a tiny space under machinery in a factory, a space so small he can barely fit, documenting that children work there. Children as young as 8 or 9, crawling under equipment that could easily sever limbs, working 12-hour days in spaces too small for adults. He emerges covered in grease and dust, drags the legislators over, and makes them look. "See this?" he says. "Children work here. This is what we're allowing." The legislators can't unsee it. That's Smith's genius. He doesn't let them remain comfortable in their ignorance. He forces them to witness. Between 1911 and 1914, New York passes more than 30 new labour laws. More workplace safety legislation in 3 years than in the previous 30. It's an unprecedented wave of reform. The laws cover everything. Fire safety. Factories must have automatic sprinklers. Doors must remain unlocked during working hours. Doors must open outward, not inward. Fire escapes must be adequate for building occupancy. Fireproof stairways must be enclosed. Fire drills must be conducted regularly. Building codes. Factory buildings must be inspected annually. Exits must be clearly marked. Capacity limits must be enforced. Ventilation must meet minimum standards. Working conditions, maximum hours for women and children, minimum age requirements, sanitation standards, required breaks, access to bathrooms and washing facilities, enforcement. Factory inspection department expands dramatically. Inspectors given power to close unsafe facilities. Fines increased substantially. Criminal penalties for violations. These aren't vague guidelines. They're specific enforceable regulations with teeth. And they're actually enforced. By 1915, New York has dozens of factory inspectors making surprise visits, issuing citations, closing dangerous facilities. The results are immediate and dramatic. Workplace deaths in New York decreased by half within 5 years. Factory fires that killed dozens of workers become rare instead of routine. The changes save thousands of lives. New York's reforms become a model for other states. Illinois, Massachusetts, California, and others pass similar laws. The Triangle Fire's legislative legacy extends far beyond New York, shaping American workplace safety standards for generations. One person watching the Triangle Fire from the street is Frances Perkins. She's 31 years old, working as a social worker, part of New York's progressive movement. She's having tea with friends at a townhouse near Washington Square when someone shouts, "Fire!" She runs outside and sees the smoke pouring from the Asch building. She watches people jump. She watches bodies hit the pavement. She watches firefighters spread nets that don't work. She watches for hours, bearing witness, unable to look away from the horror. Years later, Perkins will say that the Triangle Fire was the day the New Deal began. That might sound like hyperbole, but it's not. The experience transforms her, shifts her understanding of what government should do. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt becomes president and appoints Perkins as Secretary of Labor. She's the first woman cabinet member in American history. And she brings the lessons of Triangle with her to Washington. The New Deal labor protections, minimum wage, maximum hours, workplace safety standards, the right to organise, all bear the mark of Triangle. When Perkins pushes for these reforms, when she argues with sceptical politicians and resistant business owners, she thinks about young women jumping from windows. She thinks about locked doors. She thinks about bodies piled at exits that wouldn't open. The Social Security Act, the Fair Labour Standards Act, the National Labour Relations Act. These cornerstone pieces of New Deal legislation all connect back to that Saturday afternoon in March 1911, when 146 workers died because safety was expensive and life was cheap. Perkins serves as Secretary of Labour for 12 years, longer than anyone else. When she finally retires, she's transformed American labour law more profoundly than almost any other single person in history. And she traces it all back to the Triangle Fire, to standing on the street watching people die, to the moment when she realised that government must protect workers because no one else will. The Triangle Fire casts a long shadow across American history. For decades afterward, it serves as shorthand for workplace negligence, for what happens when profit matters more than safety. When coal mine disasters kill dozens, activists invoke Triangle. When factory accidents claim lives, reformers point to Triangle. When workers organise for better conditions, they carry photographs of Triangle victims. The fire becomes a rallying cry, a warning, a promise, never again. But never again is aspirational, not factual. Workplace disasters continue. In 1947, a ship explosion in Texas City kills nearly 600 workers. In 1970, fire at a dance hall in France kills 146 people, the same number as Triangle. In 1991, a chicken processing plant fire in North Carolina kills 25 workers, trapped behind locked doors just like Triangle. The patterns repeat. Owners prioritise profit. Safety regulations are ignored or inadequately enforced. Workers die in preventable accidents. Families grieve. Politicians promise reform. Some reforms happen, then attention fades, enforcement slackens, and eventually another disaster strikes. The Triangle Fire teaches us that workplace safety requires eternal vigilance. The reforms of 1911-1914 saved thousands of lives, but they only stayed effective because people remembered, because unions kept fighting, because inspectors kept inspecting, because the threat of public outrage kept employers somewhat honest. When memory fades, when vigilance slackens, the disasters return. That's the real lesson of Triangle. Progress isn't permanent. Safety requires constant effort. The moment we stop fighting for it, we start losing it. Rose Friedman, not to be confused with Rosie Friedman who died in the fire, is the last survivor of the Triangle Fire. She's 17 years old on March 25, 1911, working on the 9th floor when the fire starts. She escapes down the Greene Street stairs, one of the lucky ones who reached that exit before flames blocked it. She lives for 90 more years, dies in 2001 at age 107. For 9 decades, she tells her story to anyone who will listen, to students, to reporters, to historians, to documentary filmmakers. She becomes the living embodiment of Triangle, the last voice connecting us directly to that day. She describes the fire in vivid detail even in her 90s, her hundreds. She remembers the smell of smoke. She remembers the screaming. She remembers running for the stairs, feeling heat at her back, knowing that seconds mattered. She remembers looking back and seeing girls she knew trapped at the Washington Place door, pounding, begging for help that wouldn't come. She remembers surviving when they didn't, and the guilt that comes with that. Survivor's guilt is real. For 90 years, Rose Friedman carries the weight of having lived when friends died. She never fully answers the question, why me? Why did I survive when they didn't? Near the end of her life, reporters ask if she's forgiven Blank and Harris. She looks at them like they're insane. Forgive them, she says. They never asked for forgiveness. They never admitted they did anything wrong. How do you forgive someone who isn't sorry? She dies in 2001, taking with her the last direct connection to that day. Now all the survivors are gone, all the witnesses are dead. The Triangle Fire has passed from living memory into history. But the questions remain. The fundamental questions about how much a life is worth, about who bears responsibility when workers die, about whether profit justifies risk. These questions don't have expiration dates. They're as relevant today as they were in 1911. Conclusion. It's been over a century since the Triangle Fire. The Asch building still stands, now part of New York University. A plaque on the exterior commemorates the victims. Every year on March 25th, people gather to remember survivors' descendants, labour activists, students, anyone who believes that 146 deaths should mean something. They read names, all 146 names, alphabetically, one after another. It takes about 20 minutes. 20 minutes to list the dead, 18 minutes to kill them. The math is almost poetic in its cruelty. The names are important, not statistics, not 146 workers, individuals, people with names and families and dreams and futures that were stolen. Kate Leone, 14. Sarah Maltese, 14. Rosie Friedman, 18. Margaret Schwartz, 22. Catherine Maltese, 43. And 141 others, each one a life that mattered. We remember them because forgetting is dangerous. Forgetting means repeating. Forgetting means more locked doors, more inadequate exits, more preventable deaths. The Triangle Fire teaches us that safety isn't an accident. It's a choice we make every day through laws we pass, regulations we enforce, corners we refuse to cut, profits we're willing to sacrifice for human life. 146 people died because a door was locked, because exits were inadequate, because fire drills weren't conducted, because owners prioritised theft prevention over fire safety, because inspectors didn't inspect carefully enough, because laws didn't exist or weren't enforced, because everyone involved in creating those conditions thought, it won't happen here, we'll be fine. What are the odds? And then it happened, and 146 people learned, in the last terrifying minutes of their lives, exactly what the odds were. Don't let them be forgotten. Don't let their deaths be meaningless. Don't let the lessons written in ash and blood fade into history without learning them. The fire is out. The bodies are buried. The survivors are all dead. But the questions remain. How much is a life worth? What price safety? Who decides, and who pays when they decide wrong? And most importantly, what locked doors exist today, waiting for a spark to turn them into tombstones? Remember the 146. Remember why they died. And remember that preventing the next Triangle Fire is a choice we make every single day.